Hey, everybody. Welcome to a sort of extended version of what a Converge Tour event looks like and what it's about and what the content of it is. We spend a lot of time talking about these events. We certainly spend a lot of time doing them. And we want to be able to share with you guys really what the meat of a Converge Tour event looks like and share the deck that we use to guide those events so that you're familiar with it and ready to use it. Right, AJ?
Absolutely. I think for anybody that is hoping to engage students in their local market, this will be a great run through to kind of give you a foundation of where to start, right? We certainly encourage you to add your own spin, your own flavor. If your company has some content that you think makes a good fit, feel free to insert that in here. This is just kind of the foundation of where to start.
Yeah, great. And so let's just start off. AJ and I are going to do this fairly informally and just chat it through. You'll notice that our first slide covers a bit of geography on who our sponsors are. There's a couple of purposes for that. One of them, of course, is to thank our sponsors, and the other one is to let our students know that these kinds of companies are taking this topic very, very seriously. They're putting money behind the actions and the intent of the alliance.
Yeah, and a little best practice or a tip for you before I launch into a Converge Tour conversation or this first module, I always let the students know, hey, we are going to have a lot of time to play on computers, to use your phones, and to use technology today for this first 45 minutes. If you'll put those things away and stay focused up front, that's going to be super helpful in translating as much of this information to you as we can in a really short time because we got to cover a lot of ground. So always a best idea. Otherwise, you may have students playing on their phones during this first 45 minutes.
You will have students playing on their phones.
Yeah.
It's a
All
matter
right.
of how
So
you manage them.
absolutely. And one of the things that I would also encourage is, we want to bring a lot of energy when we are getting the day going. We want to create some enthusiasm, some momentum in the room. There's lots of little icebreaker games that can be played, even simple stuff that just creates a little bit of kinetic energy in the room. This is a great place to kind of get that set and get the tone going in the right direction. Wouldn't you say, Gary?
Absolutely. It's we try to make this a really fun day for the kids, and the more we can do that, the more memorable it is for them. And in fact, that's really the whole objective of a Converge Tour event, is to have this stuff stick in their heads and make them curious.
Absolutely. So moving into the next slide would just be simply setting the tone for the day, letting them know what's going to be the agenda, what's the order of operations, and what are we going to be doing. This also lets them know, hey, in just a little bit, we're going to be playing an online capture the flag computer game. So, let's stay focused for this first 45 minutes, and then we're going to get right into the game. And then let them also know, hey, this is where a day that they're going to get the chance to speak to some real cyber defenders about their jobs and ask a bunch of questions, which we highly encourage you to do throughout the day.
AJ, do you suggest that the cyber professionals that are there get introduced at this point so that everybody knows who they are, or do you suggest it happens later on?
Yeah, I think this is a great time during the day. What we want to do before the event starts is have a brief huddle with all the professionals and kind of let them know what our goals are for the day. We certainly let them introduce themselves to each other at that point, but this is an absolutely great time for them to just do a super simple, hey, this is who I am, this is where I work, maybe my job title, and then move to the next person. We don't want to get bogged down with super long
No.
introductions, but that is a great place to introduce everybody and kind of, get the room excited about who's around.
Right.
So, Gary, what is the goal of this slide? Why are we jumping right into what moves the students versus jumping right into cybersecurity?
Well, I think this is an opportunity for students to think about what gets them excited, right? And it doesn't have to be cybersecurity, for sure. It can be any number of things, but at different points during the conversation, during the Converge Tour event, you're going to come back to aspects of a cybersecurity career that hopefully align with what gets them motivated and gets them excited. So it's a good question for them. It's a rhetorical question in a way. We're not going to not suggesting that you go around the room at this point and ask them, but give them some food for thought, right? What moves you? Is it building things? Is it breaking things? Is it catching bad guys? Is it writing code? Is it selling things? Is it being in marketing? All those things are parts of the cybersecurity career profile. So, think about what gets you excited.
Yeah, and Gary, I'll be honest, in multiple events that we've done, we've actually gone around the room and asked a handful of students, maybe one at each table, is there something that's got you excited about the future? And then what we really try to do is cater our content for the rest of the day to some of those careers, right? If
Mm.
somebody wants to be a psychologist, hey, great. If you get a minor in cybersecurity, we've got great opportunities in training and education and security awareness, understanding strategy, all those kinds of things. We can kind of cater to the students' interests and kind of do those callbacks like a stand-up comedian would throughout the day to kind of re-engage the students. Hey, my psychologist over here, I need your help with this scenario or something like that. That can be really helpful and engaging for the students.
Sounds great.
Gary, there's not a lot here. What are we asking with this slide?
Well, I think at this point in time, what we want to do is try to capture the attention of the students and really ask them what they think cybersecurity means. The intent of this part of the presentation is to change their perspective a little bit, because our experience is that the majority of students think of cybersecurity as guys in black hoodies, hunched over computers, doing things in dark rooms, right? And while there may be a part of the room that appeals to, we don't want to diminish that. There's a lot more to it, and so this is sort of the part where we get to change some hearts and minds about what cyber really means.
So, in other words, this may be the image that a lot of the students conjure in their heads when it comes to cybersecurity before our event. But the goal is to get them thinking more in terms of these kinds of images. Is that kind of a fair assumption?
Oh, totally, absolutely, and there's so much to this kind of slide that you can explore with them if you want, from individual roles that you see sitting here to different industries that are represented, all sorts of things. So cyber means a lot. It's an all-encompassing term, and we want them to get that sense that there's a lot of opportunities in here.
I also think it's important to note that in all of these images, one of the core things that you see are teams, right? It's
Mm.
not an individual sport. This is a team sport. And if working in teams and with other people is something that gets you excited, this is a really great field. I know it commonly gets looked at as a kind of more of an introvert's field, but it really is about collaboration and teamwork. So I think we can kind of highlight some of those aspects as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, AJ.
So next, we're going to really jump into how cyber defenders think about the challenges that they have to face. And these are all going to come up one at a time. For the purposes of our video, we're just going to kind of show them in bulk. But, these will kind of come up: cybercrime, cyber espionage, hacktivism, and cyber warfare. And a lot of times what we're doing is we're just simply going around the room and asking a group of students, do you have a definition for cybercrime? What do you think that means? And then we'll have the professionals around the room maybe modify those statements and add to them and say, hey, yeah, I like that, but we should also consider this. And, what's the difference between cybercrime and cyber espionage? And what would that maybe look like in a real world scenario? Things like that.
Yeah, it's a good chance to get them to think about the problem a little bit, and you get to put your spin on how they think about this problem. So there's not a hard and fast way to explain this or explain cyber. So these are sort of the buckets that have been helpful for us, and hopefully they will be when you go to explain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now that we've kind of identified, why do some of the bad actors do what they do, one of the things that we want to kind of jump into next is how do they do some of these things in a really fun way, right? We can sit there and talk about different ways that hackers hack, but I think showing the students in a much more interesting way is kind of the way to go. So we provide a video. This is not our content. We're just sourcing this from the internet, but this is a really great video provided by a security firm in the UK that breaks down what different types of cyber hacks would look like in the real world. So there's identity theft, there's ransomware, there is brute force attacks, and then there's a fourth one that is escaping my head right now, but they're really creative ways of kind of showing what the effect of an actual cyber attack would feel like in real life. And I think it does a really great job. It's only about 2.5, 3 minutes long. So it's really quick at getting to the point. And again, it's just doing a little bit something different other than just slide, 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 right? Just same thing, same couple of people up front talking.
Yeah, it still presents an opportunity at the end of each of these couple videos to pause and talk with the room a little bit and ask them what they think about it. So we use them as devices to engage the kids.
Absolutely. We have another video around social engineering, and this is one where the hacker that you see here on the video is actually going to social engineer her way into getting her victim's cell phone number, his personal email address, access cut off to his mobile phone, all kinds of nefarious acts. It all happens in about 2 minutes, and I will warn you at the very end when she has concluded her attack, the guy says, holy and he says the word. So you want to be ready to cut it off with your slide advance or your spacer bar. Be prepared for that. And definitely watch the videos through before you go and present them to the students so you know what to expect and know how to discuss these things. But one of the big things that I always go over is this the kind of person that you pictured being a hacker? Is this in your mind who you think of when it comes to that career path? Because I hope it broadens the student's perspective on who can be a hacker.
She looks like we caught her mid-song.
Right. She's fantastic at what she does. I mean, she's really good. Talented.
Yeah, very good. So this is an opportunity to talk a little bit about what the challenge is, right? And it's really the reason for having all the kids in the room. And it is that the problems associated with cybersecurity are growing. They're big and growing. And the talent pool available to help address those and solve those is not big enough, right? We need help. And so, there's a tremendous cost to the cyber attacks that happen every year. There's a increasing frequency of cyber attacks. There's increase in spending every year on cyber. And unfortunately and sadly, there's an increase in the gap between the talent that's needed and the talent that's available. So that presents an amazing opportunity for young people coming out of school, if they have interest in this area, to become part of that solution and do some really interesting things. So this just sort of puts a little bit of meat on the bone for them to understand.
And I think it's important to illustrate or visualize some of these numbers. And one of the ways that I like to do that, $10.5 trillion sure sounds like a lot of money, but for a student may not be quite totally easy to understand. And so the visualization I like is $1 trillion looks like a swimming pool the size of a football field, 20 feet deep, filled from brim to brim all the way to the top of $100 bills stacked nice and neatly. And it's 10.5 times that big of a problem on an annual basis, right? I think that helps the students kind of start to visualize just how big the problem is. And I encourage you to get creative with the ways that you visualize some of these other numbers.
There's another cool way to think about a trillion, by the way, AJ, that I like as well and tend to like to use. And it is when you think of the number 1 trillion, it is 31,709 years of seconds.
Wow.
That's how big a trillion is.
Whole 37,000 years.
In 31,700 years, 1 trillion seconds elapses.
So 310,000 years.
Yes.
We're losing in seconds every year. Fascinating. Yeah, these are great numbers. And this is what I encourage cybersecurity professionals to do. Go do a little bit of research, find out where you can kind of cater some of these statistics to, and give the students some real application to what this looks like. We'll say, hey, a $4 billion company, and a student doesn't know that means $10 million a day in revenue, right? Or things like that. So kind of break it down to terms that they can understand.
Yeah.
So let's move forward, Gary. We've spent probably about the first 25 to 30 minutes or so kind of working through those first 10 to 15 slides. And what we really then want to do is, again, create that activity, create that energy in the room, and get some discussions going amongst the students. Let them be the cybersecurity professionals and speak with the professionals in the room, right?
Yep, absolutely. So this is a place where we tend to look around the room and figure out a good way to sort of carve people into small groups. And the purpose of the group is for them to have some discussion. Really helpful if there's any way to carve those groups into groups of kids who have some diversity represented among them, right?
Absolutely.
It may or may not be easy to do as you're sitting there, but to the extent that you can, it's a great idea. And there's lots of reasons for that. But if we carve them into groups, then basically we're just going to introduce 2 or 3 scenarios and ask them to think about how would you react to each of these scenarios? What would you do? And then we'll ask a handful of the tables, the groups to present their answer, and just very briefly.
Absolutely. And kind of going around the room, having them by show of hands, how many people would do option A, how many
Yeah.
people would do option B. And, hey, by the way, there is an option C, which is it depends, right? It matters on another group of scenarios or variables. So, we won't go through these scenarios, to actually walk through them. We'll let you guys read through them, but we've got a ransomware scenario. We've got a second scenario around a vulnerability in your self-checkout registers the day before Mother's Day. And then we've also got a privacy scenario around the hot new AI chat GPT, right? So conversations around how people should be using technology and what are the ethical scenarios that they should be operating in. Again, one of the things that I would encourage you to do during these scenarios, set a time limit and make it very short, create some urgency for the students to kind of work through the challenge quickly. So I will normally say, hey, we're going to give you 3 minutes to talk through this scenario, and then we're going to bring you back and get your answers. Or the next one, we're going to give you 2.5 minutes to discuss this next one now that you know what's going on, and just move through these quickly. You don't want to really let this draw out. That urgency creates some excitement in the room. At the conclusion of our scenarios, we really do want to highlight, as Gary mentioned before, the importance of diversity, the lack of it in our industry, but why that leads to better brainstorms and decision making and problem solving, as we'll see with the teams with great diversity in our scenarios, typically come up with the most accurate answers. We want to dive pretty quickly. We're coming towards the conclusion of this first module, but we do want to set some of the kind of highlights of what makes these careers really interesting and exciting. Gary, I don't think we really want to hammer on the money, but I do think it is something that is top of mind for students.
Yeah, you're right, AJ. This is a really interesting topic, and one that you'll choose to address to the level that you feel comfortable doing. We find that there are a lot of kids who will represent that money's not what motivates them, right? And so we want to be careful with that, but we do want to say, hey, if you're thinking about this, you should know what the economics of a career in cybersecurity look like. And what it looks like is a pretty good entry level salary that's available to you starting out in cyber. I think this number is actually rising year over year. There's some complexity behind that number, of course, but it's an intriguing number to a high school student to say, oh, that's very interesting, right? So we do like to cover the economics of that here. You can do that again to whatever degree you are comfortable with, and maybe read the room a little bit on that one, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of reading the room, this is going to be where we're going to essentially transition from the basic principles of cybersecurity discussion and kind of what the career can look like and how bad hackers, hack, into playing our capture the flag game so that we can reinforce some of those skills and let the students do a little bit of deep digging and some research. Prior to that, we want to let the students know, hey, there's some great resources out there available for you, and we're going to revisit these resources before the end of the day. But if any of you want to take a peek at this kind of early on, here's where I would head, would be teampurple.org. This is the Alliance's student-facing website and YouTube channel and soon to be social media channels. It's also where our career guide lives. And so the next slide has a big giant QR code. If you're presenting this on a screen in the front of the room, this is big enough for a student to pull out their cell phone and scan from the back of the room, takes them right to teampurple.org, and then they can grab that career guide, which they can use for themselves, or they can share with their families, which is a great place for that career guide to go.
And we should add that this is a point in time with Capture the Flag where your professionals that you've brought in are going to act as sort of mentors alongside of the students while they're working through the game. And as AJ said, you'll see how the Capture the Flag unfolds, but it's such a great time to actually rub shoulders with the kids and listen to their conversations and hear how they're solving problems. It's absolutely fabulous.
Absolutely. And, we have helper booklets that go along with the Capture the Flag. We actually have a whole video that overviews the Capture the Flag. So with the conclusion of this one, if you're not familiar with our platform, definitely go check out that video. It's also included in the toolkit so that you can get more familiar with what our game looks like and what you'll be asked to do as a mentor. I promise you, it's super simple. And even below here, we've got an introduction to Capture the Flag. This is where I would insert your Wi-Fi network and password if you have one accessible for the students. And then a quick preview of the game, as well as some best practices on how to play and then how to get logged in. We encourage students to play in teams of 3 or 4, but depending on your availability of technology and how the students break out, it can be larger or smaller groups. Websites provided there. And then in the toolkit, we have all of the login credentials that you can print out, cut out, and then hand to the students individually as teams. So if you have any other questions on Capture the Flag, but more importantly for this video's purposes, our basic principles of cybersecurity presentation and some of the ways that you can engage the students, feel free to reach out to Gary or myself or any of the other Alliance members that have led Converge tours in the past. It really is up to you what you want to present and how you want to engage with the students. If something is really working, I encourage you to kind of run with it, right? If there's something that's getting the students' attention, that's what this is all about. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we want students to go away with 2 things: a greater appreciation for the career path, but also a great positive feeling towards cybersecurity organizations and their teams, so that even if it isn't cybersecurity that they pursue as a career, they're still using the best practices that we're teaching during the day around, managing their privacy and good digital hygiene through the companies that they work for. Gary, what else? What can we share?
AJ, do we need to talk through what happens after Capture the Flag with the professionals getting together?
I think that's a great idea. Let's go ahead and jump into that while we have them.
Yeah. So at the conclusion of this, there's a little history or a little guide here to how to work with the results from Capture the Flag and what have you. AJ has shared that in another video. But the sort of wrap up of the whole thing, and I think in my mind is kind of a make or break part of the Converge tour to me, is to have your panel of cyber professionals that have joined you for the day make themselves available to the students that are in the room. And the idea is to get them talking, right? We tend to ask questions of our professionals like, hey, how many of you started your careers in cybersecurity? To which there is usually deafening silence, right? And it's a great way to be able to explain, well, where did you start? Oh, well, I was selling pots and pans, or, I sold yellow pages, or I was writing code and, in the government somewhere, whatever the case may be. It's a good way to get them engaged. And the idea is to seed them with a few questions and then encourage questions from the audience. And inevitably, there's a handful of kids who will step up and ask some questions. They just need a little bit of prodding and a little bit of help from you guys.
Yeah, and some of the questions that I've really enjoyed in the past have been I don't see a lot of women up there in front of us in this panel. What is it like for a young woman in cybersecurity that wants to get into the career field? Or I'm really interested in penetration testing and ethical hacking. Are there languages that I should be learning, or are there
Yeah.
websites that I should be looking at to prepare myself for the future? Are there exercises that I can be engaging in? All the way down to, how do I find a mentor? What is a cybersecurity conference like? Do you get to travel for your job? All kinds of different questions. But at the end of the day, we just want you to share your story and what makes you passionate about your career. The other thing that I would highly encourage is, be careful with how much industry jargon you're using. We're
Mm,
so apt in cybersecurity, MSPs, PII, all these kinds of terms that just come so naturally through us. Students have no idea what that means, and it can be all the way down to just basic business terminology. I've heard from interns before that some of their big takeaways were, I'd never been in a meeting before, so I didn't know when I was supposed to speak. So we take for granted how much we've learned in our careers about the basics of business and cybersecurity, and so really try to keep it in terminology that the students can understand and really grab onto and engage with.
true enough. That's a great point. And AJ and I actually spend a lot of time even talking with adults about presenting cybersecurity conversations in non-digital ways, non-digital languages. So it is important for kids to be able to understand that. So yeah, I think this is a place where your passion gets to shine, and really show kids why this is a fun place to be and a good place to think about for their futures.
Yeah, and a Converge Tour workshop really breaks down into three simple modules. You have the first 45 minutes to an hour, which is your basic principles discussion, which is what we just went through. You have your cybersecurity capture the flag, which is your second module of the day, where the students get to play in teams. And then you conclude the day with a discussion, really hands-on questions back and forth between the students and professionals about, how do you get a job, what makes it great, and what should I be doing between now and when I'm interviewing for a career to be ready. That's really
Yeah,
as simple as it is. Maybe some food in the middle somewhere there, but really it's just about having a good discussion with the students. Wouldn't you say, Gary?
absolutely. So we hope you guys will take this in the way intended, which is to just sort of give you a sense of what this um, process is all about and what this part of the presentation is all about. As always, you can help us improve it and change it as you like. You can put your own twist on it. The idea here is to get kids excited about this. So I hope you'll join us in doing that and engage your schools and get this rolling.
Thanks so much, everybody. Hopefully we'll provide some more resources moving forward, but we're enjoying this as we go, and continue to let us know what resources you need so that we can reach more students and scale our impact. Thanks, everyone.